As soon as WWE 2K22 decided to add the tag team championships into MyGM mode, I knew that I had to give a tag team only run a try. It goes without saying that this challenge is going to be extremely hard. Also, thanks to JoeMan710 and Hugo the Hugo for suggesting this challenge to us. Alongside the belts being introduced, they've also made it so that every show is now 4 matches instead of 3. This means that 16 wrestlers will be required minimum every single week. I can only imagine that keeping stamina up and having funds in the bank are going to be challenges within themselves. But then on top of that, you have to keep reworking rivalries and make sure that you have enough match classes to make it work. It's going to be a lot to juggle at once, and honestly I think I'll really struggle. But with that being said, let's get into it and see how well I can do. Okay, so let's load up a new MyGM. Now it goes without saying, but we're going to pick Kyle Slickman, and he's probably going to be our GM for the remainder of every single run, unless it's a GM specific challenge. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and choose Kyle Slickman. Now for the brand, I think I'm going to go for SmackDown to try and get some popularity up on the cheaper wrestlers. The session settings are as they usually are. The GM opponent is William Regal, opposing brand Raw, difficulty hard, and then 15 weeks. So the idea for the draft is to try and get as many superstars in as possible. So I've got to be really careful with my budget and try and sign some of the cheaper wrestlers, whilst also trying to sign some higher popularity ones. But with Kyle Slickman's power card and the SmackDown power card, I should be able to get some of the lower wrestlers up to a decent popularity anyway. And also specialists are going to be crucial for this run because I'm going to need to mix and match the rivalries. So the first signing is going to be Charlotte Flair. Now to go with Charlotte Flair, I'm going to go with Lacey Evans. To face off against them, I'm going to go with Dana Brooke, and then Toni Storm. Now for a decent mid-card male tag team, I'm going to pick up T-Bar and Mace. To fight them, I'm going to need to get 2 face cruisers. So I'm thinking Daivari and Kofi Kingston. Now I think I'm going to do a specialist only tag team. So I'm thinking either Pete Dunne and Onnie Lorcan, or Pete Dunne and Montez Ford. And in the interest of saving a bit of money, I'm going to go with Onnie Lorcan. Now for the specialist tag team on the heel side of things, we're going to go with Danny Burch and Cameron Grimes. Now I'm going to try and squeeze out one more tag team, but it does mean we're going to have to be very wary of what we're spending on the next 4 wrestlers. So I think I've used these guys in pretty much every single run, but Shotzi and Raquel Gonzalez make a great tag team, so I'm going to go ahead and pick those 2 up. And now all I need is a cruiser face and a giant face. So I'm going to go with Ember Moon as my cruiser face, and then Nia Jax as my face giant. So that's the draft done. I think I'm going to have to sign some free agents to try and bulk out the roster a little bit, but all in all I think that was a pretty good draft, and hopefully we can get this challenge done. Now immediately I've come to the free agents tab, and of course rip Kyle Slickman, he is not here because he has unfortunately retired. But it does make sense as he's currently running the show, so it would be impossible for him to sign himself. So I've got just the right amount of wrestlers to put on a singular show. And obviously wrestlers are going to need rest at some point, so I'm probably just going to sign all of these guys and try and use them as and where I can. So this is how the card looks going into week 1. We've got a few self promos and role changes on the right to try and make some of the new free agents a bit more popular. And also role changing Silence so he can go into a tag team match. We're opening the show with Charlotte and Lacey versus Tony and Dana for the Women's Tag Team Championships. Then we're moving on to Kofi and Daivari versus T-Bar and Mace, Raquel Gonzalez and Shotzi versus Ember Moon and Nia Jax, and then we're finishing off the show with Danny Burch and Cameron Grimes versus Onnie Lorcan and Pete Dunne for the Male Tag Team Championships. So let's advance into it and hope that this goes well for our first ever show. So your first ever Women's Tag Team Champions, Charlotte Flair and Lacey Evans. It's a 2.5 star match, so not the end of the world, and the rivalry has been boosted to level 1. So not too bad of a start at all. The first mid-card tag team match also gets a 2.5 star, so that's actually a pretty good start to the show. The second tag team match only gets a 2 star, but I guess that's staying in line with the drama curve, so it's not the end of the world. What is an issue though is that the main event is only a 2-star match. But Pete Dunne and Onnie Lorcan are your new and first male tag team champions. So after the first show we're only 9,000 fans behind, which is actually pretty good, and I'm hoping that I can keep that gap quite small for the first few weeks. Now I think immediately I'm going to use my Beginner's Luck and Birth of Legends power cards. I know it's only week 2, but I could really use the popularity to be boosted early on so we can try and catch Regal early. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and use both of these. So there you have the 6 people that have had their popularity boosted, and it's actually quite good because 3 of them are the jobbers, meaning that that tag team match might not be as tragic as it was going to be. So this is how I've laid the card out for week 2, it's pretty much the exact same card but just shifted around a bit. I've put a tables match as the opener and the main event, and then in the mid card we're trying to boost some rivalries. So let's advance and hope that this show is a little bit better than last week's. Okay, we kick things off with a very good start. A 3-star match and a level 2 rivalry. Let's hope that this continues. Dunn and Lorcan beat Grimes and Birch again, but it's another 2-star match. At least the rivalry went up, but that's been pretty disappointing so far. Kingston and Daivari beat Mace and T-Bar in a 3-star match as well. And that's also started their rivalry, so that's another great result. And in the main event, Toni Storm and Dana Brooke beat out Charlotte Flair and Lacey Evans in another 3-star match. Their rivalry is level 2, so this show actually went pretty well. After week 2, we're now 14,000 fans behind Regal, but that's still not too much. So let's keep putting in the work and hopefully our shows will carry us to first place. So that's how the show's looking for week 3, and as you can see in the top right hand corner, we're very much low on budget. But we've got Charlotte Flair and Lacey Evans versus Toni and Dana in the opening match. Then the mid-card, we've got a bunch of jobbers with Nicholas Mann and Tim Burr taking on Adrian Buck and Silence. The second mid-card continues the rivalry of Nia Jax and Ember Moon and Raquel and Shotzi. Then the main event has Kofi Kingston and Daivari versus T-Bar and Mace. So hopefully we can stay a decent amount of fans behind Regal whilst going into Wrestlemania Backlash. The first match only gets a 2.5 star, but the rivalry did go to level 3, so hopefully Wrestlemania Backlash will have some good matches on it. A 1.5 star disappointing match from the jobbers, but to be honest I expected nothing less. If we can build that rivalry to a decent level, then hopefully the matches can start to get better. The second mid-card match also gets a 2.5 star, so that's not too bad of a result either. And that rivalry also grew to level 3. The main event actually smashed it out the park with a 3.5 star match. T-Bar and Mace defeated Kofi Kingston and Daivari in a tables match, but it didn't increase the rivalry. At least it's getting good ratings though, so I can't really complain. As you can see, we've reduced the deficit back down to 9,000 fans. So hopefully this first pay-per-view is actually going to put us above Regal. And that was even with one pretty rubbish match in the Jobbers tag team. So that's how the card looks heading into week 4. Unfortunately, Shotzi came into the DMs and said that she wanted to run a main event match. But at the same time, William Regal vetoed Nia Jax. So I've had to go and sign Ella Rubao to fill in for Nia. That match will hopefully go down okay, but I'm a bit worried it's going to be a stinker. To try and make up for it, I've got Pete Dunne and Onnie Lorcan fighting Cameron Grimes and Danny Burch in a tag team tables match. And that one's also for the title, so hopefully it's going to be a great match. Then in the mid-card, we've got Charlotte and Lacey versus Toni and Dana to try and push them up to a level 4 rivalry, and then the Jobbers tag team to try and boost them up a little bit as well. So let's get into it and hope that Regal doesn't increase the gap in fans by too much. Pete Dunne and Onnie Lorcan retain their tag team titles in the opening tables match, and that one gets the 3.5 star rating that it desperately needed to. The first mid-card match actually gets a 3-star rating and the rivalry goes to level 4, so it's looking pretty good. This was the one I was worried about, but a 2-star match actually isn't too bad. And that rivalry is also increasing as well, so who knows, they might even put on a pretty good show. Okay, you know what, that's actually not too bad at all. 2.5 star for a match with a random jobber in it is definitely passable. But let's just hope it doesn't harm us too much in the ratings. So Regal gained another 10,000 fans on us, which is less than ideal. But still, heading into WrestleMania Backlash, we're only 18,000 fans behind. So this is how the card looks for WrestleMania Backlash. We're starting the show off with Pete Dunne and Onnie Lorcan defending their titles against Cameron Grimes and Danny Burch. Then we've got Ember Moon and Nia Jax versus Raquel and Shotzi as the first mid-card match. And in the middle mid-card match, we've gone for the jobbers to try and get them out of the way. Then it's Mace and T-Bar versus Kofi and Daivari in a tables match. And then the big hitting main event is Charlotte and Lacey versus Toni and Dana in an Extreme Rules match for the Tag Team Women's Championships. I'm hoping that this show can put us ahead of Regal or at least a little bit closer to him. So let's advance and see what happens. So the opening match gets a 4-star rating and Pete Dunne and Onnie Lorcan retain their titles in a tables match. The first mid-card match gets a 3-star rating and completes the rivalry between Ember Moon and Nia Jax and Shotzi and Gonzalez. The middle mid-card match only gets a 2-star rating, but I wasn't really expecting anything more than that. Things are picking up again in the last mid-card match as T-Bar and Mace pick up the win in a 3.5-star match. And then the main event is a very much needed 4.5-star classic. Lacey Evans and Charlotte Flair retain their championship and end the show with a bang. So as you can see, we're still 35,000 fans behind. Hopefully we can decrease that gap over the next few weeks, but the next pay-per-view could be very decisive. So for week 6, we've had a shuffle around in the tag teams. We've got Kofi Kingston and Daivari facing off against Danny Burch and Cameron Grimes. And then the main event is Onnie Lorcan and Pete Dunne facing T-Bar and Mace. I've kept the Jobbers tag team going as they're only at a level 2 rivalry, so hopefully we can build that up before the next pay-per-view. And then I've thrown Tamara Tycross into a feud with Shotzi and Raquel Gonzalez, and she'll be teaming with Toni Storm. Then as you can see, for a desperate plea for fans, we've done 3 charity promos. So let's advance and hope that this show can pull us back a little bit. So the opening match gets a 2.5 star rating and Birch and Grimes go over. The first mid-card match sees the Jobbers actually get a 2.5 star rating, so their matches are starting to get a little bit better, which will only help the shows. The second mid-card match doesn't go quite as well, and it's only a 2-star mediocre. We needed the main event to be a decent rating to end out the show, and it's only got 2 stars. I'm starting to get very worried that I won't be able to beat this challenge. Luckily for us, Regal put on a pretty poor show as well, so we're only 28,000 fans behind now. But something's going to have to really change in order for us to get that number 1 spot. So that's how the card looks going into week 7. We've got both of the titles on the line. Pete and Oni are both getting pretty low on stamina, so I think I'm going to have to give them a rest next week. But for now, they're fighting T-Bar and Mace in the opener for the titles. The midcard sees Timber and Nicholas Mann take on Silence and Adrian Buck. Then the second midcard is Kofi Kingston and Daivari versus Danny Burch and Cameron Grimes, with the main event being the women's tag team match with Charlotte Flair and Lacey Evans defending their titles against Ember Moon and Dana Brooke. I don't think this show looks that bad, to be honest, so hopefully it gets us that bit closer to Raw. So the opening match actually sees new male tag team champions, with T-Bar and Mace picking up the win over Pete and Oni. A 3.5 star rating is pretty good as well, so I'm actually really happy with that start. I don't believe it, the Jobbers have actually put on a 3-star match. They're also a level 4 rivalry, so who knows, could they even get a 4-star match at the next pay-per-view? We'll just have to wait and see, but for now that's actually really solid. Kingston and Daivari pick up a win in a 2-star match, which is less than ideal. But at least that rivalry goes up to level 1, so hopefully the ratings will start to increase soon as well. Lacey Evans and Charlotte Flair actually retain their titles again. I'm pretty sure they've defended them at least 4 times now and come out on top every single time. It's also only a level 1 rivalry and it's got a 4-star amazing match. So I've got high hopes for the next pay-per-view where we see this rivalry out. So at the end of week 7, we're only 17k behind Regal. Let's keep pushing and hope that the next pay-per-view can put us at number 1. Heading into week 8, a few of our superstars are actually really low on stamina, so I'm having to rest quite a few of the stars, which means that we're going to have to trial 2 new tag rivalries. But for the opener, we've got Kingston and Daivari versus Burch and Grimes. Then the first new rivalry is Rubal and Jax versus George and Shotzi. The second new rivalry is Garcia and Gonzalez versus Ty Cross and Storm. Then for the main event, we've got T-Bar and Mace versus Dunn and Lorcan. But Dunn and Lorcan both have below 40 stamina, so I'm hoping that neither of them get injured and then next week I'll give them a rest. So let's keep our fingers crossed and head into the show. The opening match sees Daivari and Kingston pick up a win again over Grimes and Burch. That rivalry's level 2, but it was only a 2.5 star match. The first new tag rivalry with a couple of jobbers has gone down pretty terribly. 1.5 star and it didn't even start a rivalry, so that's looking pretty poor. The second new tag match also didn't start a rivalry, but at least it got a 2-star. Again, I'm starting to get a little bit worried. Pete Dunne and Onnie Lorcan managed to win in the main event in a 3-star match and neither of them got injured. So at least there's some positives to this show, but I'm pretty sure this is one of the worst ones we've put on so far. Raw ended up only gaining 1,000 more fans than us this week, so it's really not the end of the world. I feel like I'm really waiting for the next pay-per-view, but we've still got a week to go before it. So that's how week 9 looks. We're getting pretty low on cash, but this is the best we could come up with. The main event, I've got the title on the line with Charlotte and Lacey versus Dana and Ember. Then the opener is Kingston and Daivari again versus Grimes and Burch, with the mid-card continuing the rivalry between Raquel and Sammy and Tony and Tamara. Then to try and get Pete and Onnie's stamina back up, I've thrown a squash match in between Mace and T-Bar and then Adrian Williams and Trent Shaw. By no means is it the greatest show, but hopefully it will just get us by. So the opening match actually gets a 3-star, which is ideal, and Burch and Grimes go over. Incredibly as well, the first mid-card match gets a 3-star. Sammy and Raquel go over, and the rivalry actually goes up to level 1. Also, the second mid-card match gets a 2.5 star rating as well. Now, I shouldn't really be getting too excited about this, but I thought that was going to get a much worse rating. And obviously, T-Bar and Mace go over because it was a bit of a squash match. Then in the main event, of course, Charlotte and Lacey retain the titles. I genuinely don't think they're going to lose them the entire run. But that rivalry's up to level 2, and it's a 3-star match, so I can't really complain. So heading into the TLC pay-per-view, we're actually only 13,000 fans behind. This show needs to be good and it has to propel us up to the top spot. So week 10, the TLC pay-per-view is upon us and this is how the show's going to go ahead. The male tag team championships are being defended in the opening fight between Mace and T-Bar and Pete Dunne and Onnie Lorcan. That one's going to be a TLC to get the pay-per-view match type bonus. Then we've got the level 4 rivalry coming to an end with Nicholas Mann and Tim Burr taking on Silence and Adrian Buck. Then Kingston and Daivari face off against Grimes and Burch in a tables match. To round off the mid-card, we then have Toni Storm and Tamara Tykros versus Sammy George and Raquel Gonzalez, and that one is going to be a TLC match. Then to finish the show as the main event, Charlotte Flair and Lacey Evans are taking on Ember Moon and Dana Brooke in a Hell in a Cell for the Tag Team Women's Championships. The card looks pretty good, so I'm really hoping it pushes us ahead of Raw. Let's advance and see how it goes. The opening match is a 4.5 star classic with Pete Dunne and Onnie Lorcan winning back their titles. That's a great start to the show, so long may it continue. The Jobbers rivalry actually completes and gets a 3.5 star match. Not too bad at all, seeing as they were just cheap wrestlers bought to fill in the shows. The second mid-card fight is also a 3.5 star, so this is looking really promising. Daivari and Kingston get the best of Burch and Grimes again, and that is the rivalry done. I'm not sure how, but the last mid-card match also gets a 3.5 star, with Storm and Tykros going over against Gonzalez and George, and that rivalry going up to level 2. And the main event is also a 4.5 star, with Lacey Evans and Charlotte yet again defending their titles. This is an unbelievable run, and if they last the full 15 weeks, that's insane. Okay, heading into the last 5 weeks, we're only 7,000 fans behind, so this one's going to go right down to the wire. After looking at the ratings, I put on a much better show than Regal, but he still seems to gain fans. I think maybe in the 1.09 update, they might have increased hard difficulty to be a little bit harder. But we're still going to try and push on and get the number 1 spot. So the stamina on our superstars is really starting to decrease. Heading into week 11, we have a lot of wrestlers that are below 40. So from here on out, it really is going to be a case of just trying to make it work. Anyway, that's the card we're looking at for week 11, so let's advance into it and hope that the show isn't awful. The first match definitely could have been better with it only picking up a 2-star rating. But it has started a new rivalry, so let's try and build on that in the next few weeks. The first mid-card is only a 1.5 star, and not gonna lie, I think this run might be over. The second mid-card match actually saves us a little bit and gets a 3-star rating. And we also pick up a 3-star rating in the main event, so that's not a terrible end to the show. As you can see, after week 11, we now find ourselves around 25,000 fans down. These next 4 weeks are going to be incredibly hard, but we can only pray that it gets better from here. So week 12 show is looking much better with a tag team title match going ahead in the opening fight. Pete Dunne is pretty low on stamina, but I'm just going to have to try and make it work. The mid-card sees Shotzi and Garcia face off against Rubal and Jax, and seeing as their stamina is so high, I'm going to try and put it in an Extreme Rules match to make the rating higher. Then Raquel and Toni are both really low on stamina, but they're just going to have to try and fight. Because at the minute, Charlotte and Lacey are also really low on stamina, but they're the champions, so I've got to try and keep them healthy. Then for the main event, because Cameron Grimes asked me in the DMs, he's going to be facing off with Danny Burch against Trent Shaw and Adrian Buck. So hopefully this show is enough to pull a few fans back on Regal, but I'm not holding my breath. The opening match gets a 3.5 star rating, and Dunne and Lorcan retain their titles again. No one got injured as well, which is ideal. The first mid-card match only gets a 2-star rating, and their rivalry hasn't even started yet. If their stamina wasn't so high, I would just give up. But at the moment, I need to use these wrestlers to fill out the shows. So we're going to have to put up with 2-star ratings in every single one. The second mid-card fight gets a 2.5 star rating, so not the worst, but also not really where we need to be at. Then the main event is a 2.5 star fight with Grimes and Burch picking up the victory over Buck and Shaw. And that rivalry goes up to level 2, so at least there are some positives to take out of this show. Regal gains fans on us yet again, so we now find ourselves 32,000 fans behind. So for week 13, we've had to go and buy a whole new tag team rivalry. Well, I say new, but Silence and Nicholas Mann have already been part of the show. But after having to let them go because their contract was up, I've re-signed them to fight again. This time, Silence is teaming with Jey Uso, and Nicholas Mann is teaming with Andre the Giant. Then the opener, we've got Kingston and Daivari versus T-Bar and Mace. Then Cameron Grimes and Danny Burch versus Trent Shaw and Adrian Buck. With the main event being Charlotte Flair and Lacey Evans fighting Dana Brooke and Ember Moon for the titles. And as always, we're desperately low on money, so I've thrown in 3 advertising promos to try and get some cash back. Let's advance into it and hope that it goes down okay. So the opening fight has Daivari and Kofi beating T-Bar and Mace in a 3-star match. Their rivalry doesn't increase at all, but to be honest, I'm only really caring about the ratings at this point. The first match of the new tag team only gets a 2-star, but at least it gets a level 1 rivalry. Grimes and Burch yet again beat Buck and Shaw, and it's only a 2.5 star match. But again, level 3 rivalry means that hopefully that match will end up being okay. Unbelievably, the run is over. Charlotte Flair and Lacey Evans lose their tag team titles to Ember Moon and Dana Brooke. A 3.5 star match though, so we'll definitely take that. Going into week 14, we're now 50,000 fans behind. I can't help but feel that this is all but over now. I think they have increased the difficulty of hard because William Regal is picking up 15k fans plus every single week, which at this stage of a run he'd usually be dipping down to about 10k fans. So for week 14, in a desperate attempt to try and get some fans back on Regal, I've put both titles on the line. So the opener sees Charlotte and Lacey face off against Ember and Dana to try and regain their titles. Then the main event is Dunn and Lorcan versus T-Bar and Mace in just a normal match. In the mid-card, I've put Jey Uso and Silence versus Nicholas Mann and Andre the Giant as a tables match, seeing as their stamina is luxuriously high. And yes, I know it's only 60 plus for a couple of them, but that definitely is luxurious in this run. Then the second mid-card match sees Grimes and Burch take on Shaw and Buck. Hopefully that goes to a level 4 rivalry and no one gets injured. Let's advance and hope that Regal doesn't get another 50 million fans. The opening match sees Ember Moon and Dana Brooke win in a 3.5 star rating. No one got injured as well, so that is ideal. Jey Uso and Silence win the first mid-card match and it's actually a 3 star. So that's not too bad, but unfortunately the rivalry doesn't progress. The second mid-card fight also doesn't bring any injuries and actually gets a 3 star too, with Grimes and Burch versus Buck and Shaw now becoming a level 4 rivalry. And of course at the last hurdle, T-Bar picks up an injury. And also, of course, they win the titles as well, meaning that my male tag team title holders are now out of the equation, unless there's an injury rehab card that I can purchase. So we're just going to have to pray that that's there, otherwise the show is pretty much ruined and the run is over. So with 35,000 fans behind, heading into WrestleMania, I'm not confident at all, but at least it's somewhat achievable. So that's the best show I can possibly put on for WrestleMania. Unfortunately, Regal put on a double cost card and every single stipulation now costs double. Not only that, but I had to go and buy an injury rehab card which cost me $50,000. And not only that, but Trent Shaw came up to me and said he's ready to leave unless I give him 100k. Now they're the only team in a level 4 tag team rivalry, which meant I couldn't really just let him go, but also it's $100,000. It's ridiculous as well because he's been fighting in this rivalry for the last few weeks. So it's not like he's been sitting around, he's genuinely been in the shows. So Trent Shaw, you are now my least favourite jobber and I hope to never see your face again. Anyway, the main event is Charlotte Flair and Lacey versus Ember Moon and Dana for the titles in an Extreme Rules match. Then the opener is Mason T-Bar versus Oni and Pete for the tag team titles, which is also going to be in an Extreme Rules match. Then the 3 mid-card fights are 3 normal, boring tag team matches. So I have absolutely no hope that this is going to work, but let's just go for it and see if we can somehow beat out Raw. The opening match sees T-Bar and Mace retain their titles and it gets a 4 star rating. Not the worst start, but to be honest, that's one of the best matches on the card, so I have no hope going forward. Unfortunately, Trent Shaw picks up the win with Adrian Buck and gets a 3.5 star rating. Tony and Tamara get a 3 star rating against Gonzalez and George, and that's another forgettable match. Talk about forgettable matches, there's another 3 star rating for Nicholas Mann and Andre the Giant versus Jey Uso and Silence. The only way this show was remotely going to be saved is if this was a 5 star match, which to be honest it was never going to be. It picks up a 4 star rating and Charlotte and Lacey both get injured. Pretty brutal ending to a terrible show. So as predicted, we've lost by about 102,000 fans. This run was incredibly difficult because every single superstar was low on stamina within about 3 weeks. And with the new update making you have 4 matches every week instead of 3, your roster just dies out very quickly. However, that being said, I did get pretty unlucky throughout the entire run. I had 3 massive blows going into WrestleMania. Regal used a double cost card, Trent demanded another $100,000, and then I had to buy a level 3 injury rehab card for T-Bar. Those 3 things combined completely ruined my WrestleMania and made sure that I got nowhere near Raw. Now I'm not saying without those I would have beat out Raw or got near them, but to be honest it made a massive difference. It pretty much just killed the run completely then and there. So yeah, like I said, I'm sure this run is possible, but for this one specifically I just got extremely unlucky. So that didn't go very well. I did predict this challenge would be hard, but I didn't even consider that the hard AI might have been made even harder. If you enjoyed this attempt and would like to see us try it again in the future, please do like the video and let us know in the comments below. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. Thank you all for watching and we'll see you in the next video.